Okay, I think we're live. Welcome to another edition of the Perception and Action Journal Club. We're just sorting out a few tech things. These systems always take a bit. So today I'm really excited to have the Skill Acquisition Summit group, most of them from our, we've done a couple of these in the last few years. So I'll let everyone go around and quickly introduce themselves again. We've seen them a couple times, but let's start with Paul.
Hi, my name is Paul Venner. I'm head of athletic performance for the Dutch Baseball Federation and founder of Ultimate Instability.
Okay, and then Franz is next on my screen.
Okay, Frans Bos. I'm the one with the least knowledge of baseball around here, and I want to keep it that way. But wrote a couple of books on skill acquisition, training, transfer, and stuff like that. And I'm a kind of a parole officer for the other four.
Yeah, you're going to keep us honest.
Yes.
Martijn in the bottom corner. Oh. Can you hear me, Martijn? I think you're muted.
Yeah, no, yeah, sorry. The sound is not coming through really good. But yeah, Martijn Nijhoff. I work in Holland with talents in baseball and softball. And also do some consultancy in America, and I work together with Paul and Bart and Frans. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, cool. Bart in the bottom center.
My name is Bart Hanegraaf, hitting coach for the Dutch Baseball and Softball Federation, and I work as a consultant in the United States for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I work together with Martijn, Paul, and Frans, and we look into skill acquisition and motor learning a lot.
And last but not least, Randy.
Hey, I'm Randy Sullivan. I'm the CEO of the Florida Baseball Ranch in Lakeland, Florida. And I have the privilege of working with all you guys in the Skill Acquisition Summit and learning so much about motor learning and motor control. I just want to point out that while Frans claims that he's the only one who knows the least amount about baseball, he's the only one in line to receive a World Series ring right now. So.
Yes. I've been there. I don't think they're going to send me one.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to send me or not. Okay.
But so the idea today, what I wanted to do to get together to do is kind of, I call it, we did one of these before a few months ago. I call it practice activity analysis. I say that because I don't like the word drill, right? For various reasons. But what we want to do here is we're going to talk about and look at some different practice activities in baseball for pitching and hitting, and kind of the idea here is to be critical but positive, right? What do we like? What motor learning principles does it, agility principles does it illustrate? What might we do different? We're not we didn't pick out drills to bring them to trash them, right? Though we know it's okay to be critical. So that's the idea here. And then some of it is going to be video based. Some of it will just more talk about general ideas. So I wanted to start with one that I saw posted on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, I think. And it has a lot of different things that I know Martijn and Bart do already, kind of things. But so I wanted to show you. So it's a hitting activity. And here's the basic idea. I think, can everyone see that? Okay. So we have, I don't think there's any sound here, but you can see so we have a batter. Well, you can see they're created a task where they get different points for hitting it to different locations on the wall, right? So playing with launch angle. They're moving to different positions around the, there's no plate there for one thing. They're moving to different locations marked by little cones, and they're picking up looks like variable weight and length bats. Okay, Martijn, maybe I'll start with you. I know you use a lot of these kind of principles in your. Can you talk a little bit about what you kind of like in that activity?
Yeah, what I see is that the angle of the ball changes all the time because you move around, which makes your perception action coupling like you have to use the higher information. Also, when you move up and down, the speed of the ball or the reaction time changes. So because of that, you stay in the same hitting pattern, but there's a lot of variability where you cannot consciously control it, but you have to experience it all the time. And every time you get a lot of feedback if you were too early or too late, or how the ball came in. So in that regard, you have to adapt all the time. And when you're in the game, you have to adapt to the ball flight as well all the time. So it becomes real robust, but also at the same time, you have to be adaptable to the ball flight. So I think it's a really good exercise to train that adaptability that is happening or happens in the game as well.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I like about it. I talked with someone about this last week too. Is the having no plate there, right? I think sometimes I think it's important for a batter to know that there's a difference between what's hittable and what's a strike, right? They're not the same thing, right? Bart, what about you? I know you do this some kind of this stuff too.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about not having a strike zone in training. Depending on which period of the year you are, of course, and what your goal is with the training setting. But as you say, you want to know what pitch is hittable and not necessarily what is a strike, because you want to explore your movement possibilities. The other thing that I really like there is that they have the targets on the wall. They said you hit it above the line or hit it low, or so you give them really specific and precise feedback. If the intention of
we're losing you a bit, Bart. So giving them feedback about launch angle, trying to get the ball in the air more. Maybe Paul and Franz. So what about so this is kind of training. This you might call this skill training, right? You're training to ball. What about training? I kind of separate training capacity from skill, like strength and conditioning. Training bat speed, training. The attractors. Guys talk about the abdominals. How would you maybe add something to this or do something in conjunction with this to touch on those, Paul, if you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, first of all, I think it's also very important to state that actually I believe that strength training also should be viewed as a skill, and that's I think that's often missing in the traditional strength and conditioning, that we are not looking at it from a skills perspective and actually applying all the principles of motor learning, motor control to strength and conditioning as well. This can greatly improve the way we perform and learn movements. And then relating towards applying strength exercises, for example, with hitting, a few things that I really like that add to this approach. One is, for example, if you do more traditional type strength exercises, don't do them purely isolated, separate, from your actual hitting training, but also find ways to blend it in and actually play with different exercises, integrating them in between and with your hitting session, so to get changes in the organism. So from the constraint net approach, we can change task and environment, and that are things that we do in the skill training a lot. But this way we can also manipulate fatigue and potentiation levels of the organism, and play with that as well in the mix. And this way it's not a separate thing anymore. And another thing, and that I can go into more depth later, maybe showing some videos as well. Look at exercises that actually fit within the context of movement as we do in hitting. So traditionally, a lot of strength exercises are like sagittal plane, straight movements, while we actually need to add a lot of rotation and transversal frontal plane movements to it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. I was going to come to you, Franz. Yeah.
So if you look a little bit more at the classic approach of this strength training, there's an assumption there that the body is willing to, let's say, use all the resources it has in a given situation. And that's not true. The body first wants to be sure that it's not damaging itself and it's safe and so on. And then maybe it wants to go to a higher level of output. So if you're a not trained athlete or you're not trained in a specific skill, you can maybe recruit 75% of your muscle fibers. And what you actually do with strength training is try to get it up to a higher level. So, for instance, I was a high jump coach, right? My boys could run up, plant their foot in front of them, and then apply 10 to 12 times body weight on it and jump. But if I would give them a javelin and say, now do the same thing in javelin, they would not block that foot and they would not apply that force because the body doesn't know that's safe and it backs off. So it's very important to understand that there needs to be something in place, stability, and the body needs to be sure that it will not damage itself before it wants to use the resources it has. And classic strength training is not giving you that, right? So you can be strong as an ox in the gym, but then if you have to swing a bat, you might, let's say, put parts of your body at risk. And then the body says, oh no, I'm backing off. So that's a different approach to, let's say, how you get the qualities that you have into your swing. And there's only one way to do it, is to be in a movement pattern that's representative for that swing.
Okay. So I was going to, so I think, putting in a sport, you work in tennis, just like with bat speed, right? The faster racket head speed, we kind of visualize that gives you more opportunities to act, right? You can wait longer to pick up the ball flight. You can get in position. Can you pull racket or bat speed out and train it? Develop that capacity outside of the tennis stroke? You know what I mean? Is there a way to train to improve that specific aspect of the skill?
Yeah, sure. Because let's say if you look at what's the pivot point of a stroke, be it in tennis or in baseball, it's the forces that go to your core, to your abdominals, right? And what you need to teach is to do it in such a way that let's say, abdominals accept it and they want to transfer that energy and they don't back off or they don't leak energy. So you can apply a lot of drills in the gym that address this. And I think Paul does this and Bart is doing that in batting practice. And in fact, there's not much difference in, let's say, batting practice and what you do in the gym. It's blending together.
Yeah. Does anyone else what do you do to specifically target bat speed? If you want to make, or in training, if you want to. Paul, do anyone?
Yeah, it's interesting what we did, Bart and I, with a study a few years ago. We did an intervention study where we applied what I just said before, like having like one group doing like a strength exercise and then a hitting exercise, and every time like different exercises before the hitting, and the other group doing it separately. And there we saw an increase in bat speed in the group who did the differential approach, because I think the rationale behind it is that because there is, for example, a limitation in the legs due to fatigue, they need to come up with different solutions, and every time like the limitations are slightly different, so the system needs to optimize in order to get the job done. So it becomes so I think like that is definitely one approach I think that works well.
Yeah. So I think I'm hearing the similar thing from you both. Speed is somewhat big part of generating speed is overcoming your body's protective mechanism, injury protective mechanisms. Yeah. You have to get by that. Not overrule them, but you have to get it,
So you very simply, that mechanism is switched on at the moment that your muscles don't have much tension. Then the body backs off. So initiating a swim from a lot of muscle tension is key, right? So in order to get a lot of tension in the muscles, when you initiate the swing, you need co-contraction capability. And that's almost a skill in itself, which is a difficult skill and difficult to learn. But it's very influential on how much speed you can get on the bat. Yeah. And classic training, it doesn't give you that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Randy, did you want to jump in?
Well, I think that one thing interesting about that video was they also are using the variable weighted bats program there, and I think that when you understand that you'll never be able to repeat a swing, it's always going to be slightly different. Even if you're in a very narrow bandwidth, you're going to deviate. So I think the value of things like weighted bat training and weighted ball training, the differential learning there, is not necessarily bat speed and strength. It's the rapid adjustability. You practice making those subtle adjustments so that now your movement stays within a more narrow bandwidth, and subsequently the corrections don't rob you of time. And I think it makes your bat move faster because it's more it's less variable in its pathway. It's able to make adjustments.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's like Paul was making.
Yeah, also to add on,
speed is a skill. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Bart.
Yeah, what Franz said about active tension in the muscles. If we're going to go, looking at this specific drill, then one of the critical points that I have with this drill is that the learner is placed in a different environment, so it has different cones set up, so it sees different lines. The thing is, though, I don't think they change ball speed or ball direction. So there's no curve balls, change ups, or whatever. So there's one type of pitch coming. So therefore, anticipation is probably going to be less. So the hitter knows what's coming, and some parts of the swing now become less valuable. So like loading up and being able to put your foot down whenever you want gets less important because you know what type of pitch is coming. And that probably will lessen the active tension in your muscles. If you don't know what's coming, you have to be ready for everything, and that probably raises the co-contractions in your body a little bit more. So if I can, put one critical point to this drill, the hitter probably knows what's coming, so is not relying on co-contractions, but it can be a little bit more passive, and then thus it could be that the swing becomes a little bit slower. So Franz and I did an analysis, and we compared golf to baseball hitting. And one of the biggest differences there is that golfers, they can use passive stability by using a lot of stretch and a lot of range of motion because there is no time pressure and you know what the object is that you're going to hit. In baseball, you never know what you're going to hit. You can only anticipate, but you got to keep in the back of your mind something else might come. So that changes the information that you get from the environment a little bit and how you activate your body in order to hit the right thing.
Yeah, but the thing is with that drill is when they have cones in front and back, by moving to the front and back, that already gives them a little bit of that they need to have a more active load instead of using just one cone, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you upset the timing. So that's what I really like, and you have to make adjustments like on the go. The only thing is anticipation. You know what's coming, so you might go into an automatic flow of just being able to hit a fastball, or in this case, a 30-mile-an-hour object. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. Do you think there would be any value in varying the ball, like not just the side, but what I'm thinking of is having a task where the ball you hit, you have to brace for. Like imagine throwing someone a basketball and trying to hit it with a baseball bat. You have to brace your body for this contact. That's right. You think that would be any kind of?
We did some stuff with hitting basketballs in the past, but what they get is really almost they almost break their wrist at some point when you do a lot. The impact is so much higher than with a baseball, of course. So yeah, no, I totally hear what you're saying. I think it might be a good thing, but you have to be very smart about if you really do basketball.
I would worry that would give us non-contextual variability there. That would be it would, because I'm not going to move as fast when I know I'm going to impact a heavy ball. So the context would change a little bit. And one thing I like about what they're doing there though is the variable movements. I think that, and at least in the United States, we have to get a good pitch to hit because we don't move well enough to hit bad pitches. We don't know how to control our body on the edges. And so the only pitches, according to, Gibson's affordances that present themselves as hittable are the ones that we can move well enough to hit. And I think this allows the athlete to explore the movement, and what Paul was talking about making the strength training a part of that, and explore the movement on the edges. So you learn to find stability on the edges. And that way, when you don't get a good pitch, or when you're not on time, on plane, on balance, that you can still find a way to find stability and impact the ball with some authority, instead of just kind of giving up and kind of waving at it. So I think I like that a lot.
Yeah. The other one I saw, it's very simple thing and similar to kind of in this one, is that I kind of like the basic principle of it. I don't know if you can see, I just have the basic idea here, if you guys can, I don't know if you can see, it's very small. So batter's hitting, getting thrown a curveball or something, they hit, they move back to a plate behind, and they're getting the same pitch. I kind of like that, because I think a thing sometimes underestimating in baseball is there's not just one place you can hit a ball, right? There's multiple points of contact. It's a 3D, right? So I think sometimes batters, understanding that. So it's not just moving you back for variability's sake. It's to actually see the same pitch from different locations and stuff. Do you guys kind of do that, Martin?
Yeah, we actually use 3 or 4 plates, and you if you hit it twice well, then you move up, and then you move all the way back. So you see the same pitch from different angles, and you also find a solution to hit all these pitches. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then sometimes you say you can only, and we vary in that, hit everything, doesn't matter where it comes, or okay, now you only hit strikes, and you put the decision making in there. So it really depends on the goal of what you're doing, and what you're trying to train, or even do everything in a training. Okay, now we hit everything, see where all the solutions are, and if you know that you can hit everything, it becomes maybe easier to only hit in the strike zone. So this whole awareness of like what Randy said with the affordances, you stimulate that by doing stuff like this.
Yeah, I think it's a good example of putting some thought into why you're varying things, right? You can just randomly vary bat weight and position, and it'd probably be good, but it's better than not. But you can also think about what am I trying to achieve with it. Yeah.
If you can specify why you are doing what you're doing, instead of just randomly using variation. If you can attack certain areas, then I think the learning curve will go faster.
Yeah. And even back to Paul and Brent, I think part of variability is part of bat speed, being able to generate speed, is being variable, right? Being able to have a adaptable swing. It's not just brute force, right?
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty about like the constraint net approach. If you apply it well, you're gonna find like what is the bottleneck within the movement pattern. So what attractor is actually like causing the movement to not be optimal or have risk for injury, and then you can build your constraints in order to kind of force somebody out of it, or actually like strengthen like the pattern that you actually want to see. You can, and that's the thing. You don't want to have just a variation for the sake of variation, but you really want to direct it into like the part that you want to hit.
Yeah,
and then you get much more quicker improvements in your performance.
Can I? Because I have a bunch of videos lined up where I think Paul and Franz and Randy and we all can. Then it puts context to what we're talking about.
Sure. Yeah.
Let me see if it works.
Ledig scherm.
I'm gonna click.
You guys can learn some Dutch.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's right.
You see it?
So Rob,
here
while
it is.
he,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah?
There you go. Okay.
Oh,
There you are.
You got the tunnel, infinite tunnel effect.
You see this?
Got it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say the front foot placement here is terrible. So if we do an analysis, then you say, hey, this front foot is not good. Now, how are we going to...
Why?
Yeah?
Just why is that terrible in that image? Is
Okay,
it
so
the
see
alignment or
on his toe, it's closed, and when he's going into rotation, his whole foot is moving. So it's not a very stable anchor point where his whole hip can rotate around, and his knee is not stable, it's moving from left to right. So then we go, okay, how can we use the constraint-led approach where you learn from all the differences, not doing the same drill all the time. But okay, the front foot placement is the problem. How can we make this unstable so it will find stability? Now you can, do a certain normal lift, but you can also do a lift like this where you see that his front foot placement is under pressure. At the same time, I'm just throwing out some variations. This is all from Paul. So we'll get back to this again. Here, this front foot placement is under pressure. Then you go into throwing a mat ball in a sand pit, and you see when his foot hits the sand, the error is
Magnified.
So you see him shifting in, so it's not very stable. He gets direct feedback, so you can also do this throwing a baseball. Again, so the theme here is front foot placement, and we have to attack this problem. You see it's way better here. And then you go into, like really throwing a ball at different targets, where you see that every time he plants his front foot, it's a little different. So he has to adapt, and he has to have his front foot very, very stable to be able to deal with all these variations.
Yeah, I really like that. So just to kind of fill in the constraint here is right. You're adding the weight, the sand, the ramp to step on. That's a constraint. But the key element to me, is you're adding it so it makes his existing solution even less effective, right? You're gonna have trouble lifting the high weights. You're gonna fall over in the sand, right? You're pushing him away from something you don't like, right?
Yeah, and then you see that here the integration between strength training, what Paul does, which we do not call strength training, but more coordination training, and also mat ball throws. That's kind of in the middle, and the skill training itself. It has to be blended. Because you get a lot of loud noise, like Randy always says in France, and then you will find stability quicker.
Yeah, Franz, do you use this kind of thing for what you call movement analysis too? So if you're trying to diagnose a a performer, can you do this kind of variability constraints to figure out where the attractor, or can you usually just do that from looking at the movement itself?
Mainly do it from looking at the movement itself. So if you take that example we just saw with the foot being internally rotated, right? You could very easily analyze that as let's say emergency solution for not having enough tension in your gluteus, because if you start internal rotating with your leg, then your gluteus gets stretched, and that's where the tension then comes. But halfway through the throw, it's unstable. So the analysis that you then have is, okay, it's not just a problem from the ankle joint; it's a problem from the hip, right? There's nothing happening there. And then if you look at the exercises, like doing a clean and landing on a box, then that front leg needs to have tension around the hip in order to be able to land properly. And the same thing happens in the sand and so on, right? So that's let's say the progression of thinking from the analysis to the exercise. But then you can also reason back from the exercise to the analysis. And you can see where in the exercises the solution space is and where it collapses. So using the sand to make the solution space collapse, and you see it collapse, then you can say, calculate back, okay, see, my analysis was right.
Yeah.
So you can use exercises in order to, let's say, augment your analysis in a way that you get confirmation of, or see, yeah, it makes sense that it goes wrong here, or it makes sense that he finds another solution. So probably my analysis was spot on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like that example you gave, that's a endpoint problem.
Yes.
You know, it's always almost always caused by something earlier on, right?
Exactly.
In the kinetic chain that causes it at the end. So, but do you think? I guess the more analysis you understand the problem, the better you can design the activities, right?
Yeah.
If you don't understand it at all, I guess you could just do a constraint to like the sand to take it away, right? But the more you understand, it's the hip or the whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I do more and more, or I just throw it in because I'm more and more inclined to think in those things. You can vary three things, right? You can vary organism, you can vary environment, you can vary the task. So very classic in differential learning is task variation, right? What these boys are doing more compared to what Shorehorn is doing is our environmental variation. And my idea more and more is that if you vary an environment, you address components of movement that are much deeper, much more basic, like body muscle tension and things like that. Where if you only use task variation, you're actually working on the total pattern much more. So you can, let's say, use then shifting from task variation to environment variation if you want to, let's say, address more basic things like tension and things like that.
Yeah. No, I like that. I always think of task constraints are more specific, right? Changing the size of a baseball bat has no effect on playing tennis, right? But environmental variations, changing the consistency of a surface you walk, that's going to affect everything you do.
Yeah,
right?
Something we haven't addressed when it comes to bat speed is the need for deceleration, right? If you put you in a Ferrari and I say, okay, here's the circuit and go as fast as you can, you're very excited. But then if just before you leave, I say, I'm not sure whether any brakes in there, right? You're not going to go flat out. And that's the same with a baseball swing. So you have to address that deceleration pattern as well. I know that Bart is doing that quite a bit. So that's a very important part as well. And you have to address that in multiple ways. And one of the ways is to change the bat and the implement that you decelerate, and then find out what the best brake system is.
Is that's the same kind of logic as the protective mechanism, right?
Exactly.
The body's not going to let you accelerate if you don't have a plan.
Right.
to decelerate. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Rob,
Go
go ahead, Bart.
Go ahead, Randy. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
All right. So Rob, a couple of things that Paul and Martijn alluded to that I really like. Complex organisms always they organize themselves on a stable state and they bifurcate into two unstable states. And I read a book recently called Self-Organization in Biological Systems. And it was talking about honeybees and ants and how beavers build dams and things, and they kind of all self-organize in the same way, but you can influence that. For example, all the beavers build their dam the same way, but if I put a boulder in the river, they have to change the way they build their dam. And so what Martijn and Franz and Paul and Bart are doing there with their movement analysis is we consider a bifurcation in movement like a decision the body has to make. Like, where is it going wrong? And right there, the foot placement was the place where it could have gone this way and it went that way. And what you find is that if you can identify the decision and then insert a perturbation in that vicinity, the body will organize to find stability and in a more efficient pathway. And so what they're doing is inserting perturbations in the vicinity of that body's decision point, which I really, really like that approach.
yeah. No, that's really
absolutely. And to in line with that, like if you've got a stable solution, but that's not optimal because, for example, you've got too much muscle slack, and so you need to make a lot of movements to get the tension right. The body doesn't want to change that because it's stable. It works. It's not good, it's not performing well, but it works. So then you have to destabilize it and show the body that it's not working optimally in order to convince the system to find a new pattern that works better. So first you need to destabilize the stable pattern in order to be able to have that phase transition towards a better pattern. And then adding the perturbation actually helps you strengthen that stable pattern and making it more robust and deepen those attractor wells even further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it reminds me, I don't know, Franz, so there's differential learning, and then there's also some people call it difference learning, where you contrast a maladaptive movement pattern to a better one. You go back and forth, back and forth. I don't know if kind of perturbing kind of achieves the same thing, like almost a compare. You can see it lets the person compare the movement pattern to a better one. I don't think it's quite the same thing, but I do like that idea of perturbing around this bifurcation point. Yeah. Yeah, no, really good stuff. Does Randy or Paul, do you have some stuff you want to, one of you?
Go ahead, Paul.
I do have some videos of exercises that link nicely up to the things we did before. I hope the screen sharing works.
It's usually robust, but you never know.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see.
I see it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. So yeah, we talked about, like, basically both in hitting and pitching, like this pelvic movement. And one of the hardest thing is like keep the pelvic control in a way that you like first have the quality right after the load, like Randy talks about a lot, and then move from the frontal plane towards the transversal plane. So having the rotation in there in order to actually be able to have a good energy transfer. So this control, it's so specific. In order to have that on a very high level, you're not going to reach that by doing more cleans and more squats and more jumps and things, because it's so context specific, but also like it's much more sophisticated than just lifting a heavy weight. Also, there is no heavy weight when you do these exercises. So these are some things we've just been talking about, like how can you get more co-contraction, get rid of the slack on the system. So have a lot of variable loads in different directions with very little time to execute the movement increases the need for those co-contractions. And instead of moving only in like the sagittal plane, like move in different directions. But even like with those exercises, you see, like for example, the middle one, you still don't have this high level of pelvic control that you actually need in the hitting and the pitching. So then, like, can you do all kinds of exercises that actually allow you to also to add those rotational movements in there, and building constraints that force you to move as quick as possible. And then there's not just one exercise that's like perfect, but you get this whole mix of exercise that all hit different elements and different parts of the spectrum. And if you throw all that into the mix within your practice, you get a really rich learning environment, and you get, like the same as Martijn showed, that there's not really a distinct line where the strength or coordination training stops and where the actual skill training starts. Like it's more of the same thing, and it's you get all those overlaps. So that was just some things that I like to show.
Yeah.
Oh,
I can put this. There we go.
So
Can I go ahead, Ron.
So that's one side of the spectrum, right? Now we say, okay, purely gym work with heavy lifting doesn't give you any experience in what the pelvis does. You can go also to the other side. You have to coach and say, listen, you have to use your pelvis exactly like this and this and this and this. Right? That doesn't work either. For the simple reason that you got a pelvis with movement in 3 planes, and these 3 planes influence each other. And what you need to have is a toolbox that teaches you that if you do a lot in this plane, it will affect movement in that plane, right? So you have to give people a toolbox, and you cannot give a toolbox with very precise prescription of how the pelvis should move. It should move, let's say, in a certain way, but that's all depending on the amount of range of motion that you have available, and you need to explore all the combinations that are in there in order to find the optimum one. So this approach is not just, let's say, criticizing classic gym training, but also criticizing classic prescriptive batting training and pitching training.
Yeah, I really like the you said the kind of the time in there too. I know reading your book, Franz, you talk about, you know, the faster you push movements at the higher level, it makes the constraints more understandable, right? There's the options you have to move go down and down and down as you push right. When you move slowly, there's a million ways you can move. But,
Yeah.
So I think I really like that part of that.
Yeah.
I think you're right. The connection. You're right. It's a skill itself. It's all coordination, right?
It's also proven in tennis quite well that if you move very slow, you're hitting very slowly, you make a lot of errors. If you don't make many errors, if you start moving quicker and quicker, you start to make more errors. But if you then go to even higher speeds, then the error count goes down again, because self-organization becomes better. For simple reason that you have less options, and you can find these options better and apply it better in a context.
Yeah. There's some really classic studies on just kind of reaching things, showing that even if you give people tons of time, they tend to move quicker. Yeah. The explanation used to be to reduces noise, kind of, but I think there's a better way to think.
And that's what they did in Belgium, where they were very successful with tennis. A couple of people, number 1 in the world, especially in the female department. As soon as kids can hit a ball, they have to hit it flat out.
Yeah.
Right.
We've got a question here I wanted to pull in from, and if anyone's listening, you can, if you're watching on YouTube, you can send this one. This is from Mike. So this is kind of Bartine and Bart, maybe. How do you know those constraints like you're putting in are going to transfer, right? Or you're doing some really wacky things. Are they going to kind of lead to movement stuff that won't be used on the field? Is there anything that you do to kind of address this, or what are your thoughts on that?
So if I understand this question correct, so how do we know if they really transfer to the field?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess maybe I could frame it. You know, if you stabilize in sand, if I just put you back on solid ground, are you going to go back to your old old way of doing it? That might be one way of looking at transfer. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's hard to really objectify or quantify. Like, is this leading to 100% transfer? I think that's the strength of variability and attacking one theme with different variations, and not allowing the body to choose the bad movement pattern as a solution, right? So as Paul was saying first, a bad movement pattern can be an attractor, and that can be really stable, especially if somebody is using that bad movement pattern for years and years and years. That's their preferred pattern, so it's really hard. I think the more you destabilize that, or the more you push the body to another solution, so not allowing the body to use the bad movement pattern, eventually it will prefer this movement pattern over the bad one. I can't say exactly like this is 100% transferable, but yeah, that's where movement analysis comes in. This is where attention to detail comes in as a coach, and this is also the art of coaching. Like, how do you see and watch your athletes performing the exercises, and you watch it over a period of time. And I think this is also one of the downfalls in coaching, is that we want results right away. But in learning, you need some time. It's a process, and it needs attention, because maybe somebody can pull up a quick change, but it doesn't mean that it sticks or that it's learned yet. So
Right.
Yeah. And a little side note to this, because this is, spot on. But if you only throw in the sand, if I read this correctly, if I only would throw in the sand, then probably there won't be a good transfer. If I would only do this drill or only do that drill, then it wouldn't make sense. It is really about all the different variations that my body has to understand. I have to do this solution all the time in all these different situations, and then it will stick, and then it will transfer. But just doing one thing, one drill, then it will not have a very big transfer. Just a side note.
Yeah, very good. And I think you want to stay away from dependency of drills. So, if you use bands or you use resistance or a lot, you might become dependent on that. That's not what you want. You need to come up with the motor solution yourself. And that's where variation comes in. It stimulates the body to come up with this solution yourself. You have to coordinate these patterns on your own. So yeah, that's where, again, you don't want to stick to one drill and do that over and over again. You need variation and
Yeah.
Rob.
I think that I like the idea of converging drills, right? That's what Paul was showing. They're all doing the same thing, taking away that bad landing in a different way. The other one I think you guys naturally do, you showed it in yours, Martin, is having the full skill after, like letting them put it back. So after I get you to throw in the sand, then get on the grass, get on the mound right after. So you can put it in the new solution in there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So Randy, did you?
One thing we've started doing, we had the fortunate circumstance of having these Newt Force censored mounds and platforms, that ground reaction force that the inventor let us beta test, which has really been handy. And we've been able to test a lot of the interventions to see at least do they create the ground reaction force that we consider needed on the real skill, and is the drill or exercise mimicking the muscle activity that we expected to see in a game situation. And that's been really helpful. But I think your point there of always blending it back to the specific task and mixing it all together, like making sure, first of all, that it's not just a theory, that we think it's working, that we're going to get it back to reality, so their body kind of learns to move it in that context. Really good idea.
We got another one here. We kind of already talked about this. So in pitching and hitting, can you explain the importance of training deceleration patterns? I think a few minutes ago, Franz was, this is critical, right? For if you want to accelerate as much as you can. I don't know if I have any video examples, but Franz, you mentioned using different weighted implements. Bart, I know Bart, you do.
Yeah,
you have a bunch of things.
We're looking it
you
up.
Have one? Okay.
Yeah.
So I know I've seen you do ones live, Bart, where you do this in hitting, where you don't like something about the way people decelerate. You kind of do the same thing, kind of the constraints, right? Are you queuing it up right now?
Give it 1 minute.
Okay. Okay. But yeah, so we lost them.
Mm-hmm. I can speak to pitching deceleration there if you want.
Okay,
for a
yeah,
little
go
bit.
for
Okay.
it. Yeah.
So I actually gave a talk the first time I ever met Franz. I gave a talk on this, on the anatomy of deceleration, and I'll just show you. Let me screen share here, okay? And I'll show you a drill that's really popular that we've kind of steered away from. Share screen, okay? And impact screen and share. There we go. You got me?
I see. Yeah.
Okay. So like this is a drill called the towel drill, right? And really popular. And what we do is we put a towel in the guy's hand, and we have this other guy over here in front of him, and he just takes himself through this motion and tries to reach out and get extension with his arm to get to that place. Okay. Now the problem with that is that, as you go through this video, it's the idea that we need to get extension creates some anatomical danger zones. Okay, so I'll show you. Like, first of all, it kind of helps us violate some of these attractors that Franz talks about in this book. But the biggest thing is when you let go of a ball, when you throw a baseball, the muscles on the back tend to surrender like a guy losing a tug of war. And when you're linear with that deceleration pattern, it leaves the biceps alone to resist, long axis distraction, humeral head elevation, and terminal elbow extension. And when you trace the biceps all the way up to the labrum, it attaches to the superior anterior labrum, and that's where you get a slap tear. Oftentimes, it's this linear deceleration pattern that we see where our biceps is raging eccentrically to resist that movement. And it's actually the biceps tendon that tears the labrum off. And so your body knows this over time, and it's going to either it'll break, or here's a picture of arthroscopically of the biceps actually having torn the labrum off the socket. And your body will know this. If the deceleration pattern isn't adequate, it will begin to protect itself over time. It won't let you continually traumatize connective tissue without consequence. And the other problem is down in the forearm. The biceps is the number one supinator of the forearm. And so when you get linear like this and the biceps has to rage eccentrically to resist all that by itself, it creates a supination moment in the forearm, which then turns off the flexor pronator mass that protects the UCL. Okay, so and that can result, that can lead to danger in the UCL. So the thing is, anatomically, with a linear deceleration pattern, my biceps raging actively, the way we inhibit that is we make sure that we have a rotational deceleration pattern. And when you do that, that movement of internal rotation seats the head of the humerus in the socket and turns off the biceps to make a more clean deceleration pattern. Now, that then will allow us to accelerate the body because we'll feel safe and secure, and we won't have that risk of injury.
Yeah, I'll take another line from Franz. You're right. You want the athlete to learn to control forces, not postures.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So a towel drill is a posture, right? Separation is a posture, right? That's why I think those are not. You don't want to get them to learn a particular body position or posture.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Yeah.
Bart, did you guys have yours? They're back. You got it queued up?
Some technical first internet connection, and now we're trying to get some video going. But
okay, no problem.
I don't know exactly what you guys just talked about. I heard the last part of Randy. I think he explained what the deceleration pattern looked in pitching, connected to injury rate, and also if you decelerate in an efficient way, moving with your muscles, then you allow your body to use all that force. The same principles apply with hitting. So I'm going to try to share my screen, and hopefully we'll stay in the in the podcast right now. Boom, boom, and then
see it. Here it comes. There it goes.
Yeah. So a couple of things in hitting. When you have your back, your thorax has more vertebrae than your lumbar spine, so there's more mobility in your upper back. And what you see when hitters are hitting is that they use a lot of that upper back mobility to get rid of energy and not having a lot of jerk in their body, and their pelvis and lumbar spine is staying stable, and that allows for that range of motion and to get rid of all the energy of the swing. Same here. So what we look for is clean deceleration, no jerk in the body, no forces going to risky spots. And you see here in this example, Soto in the top, he is doing that really stable and using deceleration from his upper body and using his pelvis very stable. In the bottom, you have a guy where his pelvis is dumping anteriorly forward, so that puts a lot of shear forces in his lower back and maybe abdominals. So that's forced to positions where you don't want them to be. So what we want to do is we want to teach people to rotate in areas where the body is allowing them to rotate. Another example of some drills, because I can go into detail, but I don't think this platform is sufficient for that. But some practical applications that we do. Here we go. In the bottom, teaching, using different implements, teaching rotation from thoracic spine, constraining the body in that way that we put emphasis on deceleration and using as many degrees of freedom as possible to dissipate that energy away. Some step through drills. So the pelvis plays an enormous role in how you control your upper body too. So the pelvis is dumping forward, that inhibits rotation of the upper body. So putting some drills together where you stabilize the pelvis. And then also using targets in the environment. So on the top right, we have an elastic band behind the hitter. So when he hits, he needs to touch the band, and now we know that he's fully rotating through the pitch. Now, some downsides, of course, it depends on pitch location, how far you're going to rotate your upper body. So you have to be, paying attention to details when you look at these drills. But these are some ways to use drills to attack a certain problem. And I think the most important thing is to have a really clear understanding of anatomy, as Randy was just talking about with the bicep muscles. The same thing goes for hitting. We rotate the elbow in, so we have a lot of isometric strength going through, and then we pronate as well, and that puts all the forces going through our back, and now we can rotate our upper body to get rid of all the energy in a safe way. And if we can do that, then we can hit the ball very hard.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, I know I've seen you do that one. A couple of those live. They really do. Another question I wanted to. This is a good one, I think. This is a question about. Is there a place for soft toss drills? So if anyone doesn't know, instead of having a pitcher throw at you or a machine, you have usually underhands or light toss. I'll add in tee work, hitting a ball off a tee. Is there a place for that still in your guys' mind? I don't know, Bart or Martijn, you want to? Randy, I don't know if there's an equivalent in pitching of, is there like extra slow delivery, like slowing down your delivery?
I kind of, we dabble in hitting a little bit too here, but yeah, there is, because people do these slow motion flat grounds and things like that, and 50% bullpens and things. And I think that the one thing you always have to concern yourself with is, for specificity, we need the intensity of the movement to be equivalent, right? Because the pattern will erode if we speed it up, if we haven't learned to control it at high intensity. And I think that things like tee work and soft toss, and even when we do our drills into a mat short of a full distance, right? I think that, your podcast is perception action coupling, right? And I think that in those things, and you can also throw in there, in addition to tee and front toss, is the 40-40-40 guy, right? The 40-40-40 practice, where you have a 40-year-old guy throwing 40 miles an hour from 40 feet, and it's nothing like a game, right? I think that I kind of look at those as, we're not going to get great contextual information for the perception side, but the better I move, the more I expand my affordances. And so maybe you could look at it as more training the movement side of the equation. And if you're really locking in on becoming a better mover in the edges of the strike zone, move the tee around, do soft toss where you're working on the edges of the hitting zone, and learning to find stability where the movement might break down. I think there's a good place for those, as long as they're always, like we said before, blended back to as close to representative design as we can get.
Yeah. I think I'll go with Martijn and Bart. I like, in some places, I think they're useful, but I think you made a good point there. I think what you want to use them for is you don't want to use them for specificity, right? So you're not trying to produce a perfect swing. So I like the idea of using tees of different heights, different locations, as a way to add variability. So I think the danger is when you try to use these things as to produce the actual pattern you want in the end, like the correct swing. That's where I think most people don't like those. Martijn and Bart, do you?
Yeah, I'll jump in because we have a pitching guru talking about hitting right now. I'm just kidding, Randy. No, I agree with Randy. There probably is a place for T-work sometimes. It depends on age, depends on level, but I think you have to look at drills or activities from two lenses. What is the positive transfer and what is the negative transfer? And then compare what skill are we dealing with here. So if you have a tee, we take the one extreme. The tee is a closed skill. The environment is not changing. Hitting is more of an open skill where the environment is different every time. Hitting off of a tee is not an interceptive timing task. We don't have to intercept an object coming in. So there's a lot of different things playing part when hitting off of a tee. We talked about time pressure. There's no time pressure hitting off of a tee. So now I can rely on passive stability, creating a lot of range of motion to create momentum. And I'm not targeting specific parts of movement that are very, very valuable within the context of performance. Does it have positive things? Sure. If you just started to learn, you want to use errorless learning. There are also things that you can use the T for, but you got to be mindful of the negative transfers as well. And I think, if you sum them up and you have a really good idea of why you want to use the T and the pros are more than the cons, then go ahead and use them. I have my doubts that the T will offer you a lot of transfer into the game. But then again, if we use a med ball, we're also not using interceptive timing task, and we're using a variation to the theme. So, I'm not going to say yes, use it or don't use it. I think you have to have a very good understanding of why you're using it. And as long as the pros give you a good foundation of why you're using it, then go ahead. But you have to be very mindful of the negative transfer that it has as well.
Yeah. Paul and Franz, I know you guys talk about like passive and inefficient attractors, right, in the system. Is that when you do things like that, decompose and slow things down, are you opening the door for those kind of things to come in? Is that kind of the danger with some of these movements? Franz, do you ever, like soft hitting in tennis, do you ever kind of see any use of that where you're doing really soft toss to a player to learn its stroke or something?
Well, what it definitely doesn't do is give you a easy way to stabilize your body. So it's easier to stabilize your body at high intensity, because then the system wants to make the body simpler, right? And it doesn't matter whether it does it initially by freezing degrees of freedom. It's all about having all these 150 something joints that need to be controlled and reducing that to a lower number. And definitely working at a low speed doesn't give you that. Also, being repetitive with the same pattern over and over and over again doesn't guarantee you go into passive attractors, because they will work in that one situation. So you have to always combine a number of things. One is variability. The other is really high intensity movement. And the third one is obviously an outcome, a goal. And if you combine these, then you probably give the body the best tools to self-organize into an efficient self-stability with a simple body.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think we have a few more minutes, right? Randy, did you have anything else you wanted to show us or get to, or did you? I know you had in your.
One more thing.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I don't know if Randy set it up to add on to this point. Sorry, Randy. But I think for hitting coaches, we talked about this at the summit too, and Franz, I think you read about it as well. But you're always in some sort of paradox when you're training for hitting, because if you want to be really specific, you need to hit 95 miles an hour. There's going to be a lot of failure going on. You're a really good hitter if you hit 30% of all the pitches that you hit with hard contact. So that means that the learning curve is probably not very, very high. So therefore, you need to go away from specificity and make the environment easier so that you have a higher percentage of success. But then you go away from specificity, and this is, I think, the battle that you face. You have to come up with smart interventions, like how can we get in between so that it's still specific but also enhances learning. So
not easy.
It's not easy.
It is a tough problem. Yeah.
So Rob, you showed that first video, and then you showed the second one, and in my mind, those were the same experience, right? One was just a little more variable than the other. The one where we just had two plates and we're moving back and forth, that's minimizing the amount of variability. And then the other one where they had all of this different things going on, there was a lot of contextual variability there. And so you can use that as sort of a progression, regression. I think it was you at the summit that said, your sweet spot is about 70% success in motor learning. And so when we're individualizing our training for athletes, we individualize it in the gym and in our skill work and in all of our experiences by looking at, okay, is the athlete succeeding in the experience 7 out of 10 times? If he is, we need to add more variability and make it more chaotic. And then if he's being overwhelmed and succeeding maybe 3 out of 10 times, then maybe we regress back to the other drill where we have less variability, even back to the tee where we have less variability, and maybe kind of look at all of it as just a way to individualize based on the ability of the specific player.
Yeah. I think we talk about sometimes in motor learning, the difference between making a task easier by decomposing it, breaking it into pieces versus simplifying. I think we always want simplify, right? Reduce the variability, reduce the speeds. Like Paul's is a great example. Always the whole pattern of coordination is there, right? You're not stopping and say, just move your leg, right? You're always you're simplifying it by giving them less weight. Maybe the aqua bags are not moving stuff around as much, so it's simple. It's scaling it up and down, not breaking it apart. I think is really critical.
Yeah. And still then, like, I also do like more isolated movements, like to isolate one specific area for local co-contractions, or just purely like muscular recruitment or isometric strength. But then every time put it back into the context again. So if you do that, put it back into the context.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think we're
Here's
just about. Well, sorry.
One more thing.
Yep, for sure.
All right. Yeah. So what you were talking about motor learning now and motor learning principles. I think we all know that external focus and internal focus with the T. How do you use the T? A lot of times it's to try to create a ideal movement pattern, and it often leads to an isolated movement that is specific for that one situation, but it also leads for the athlete to really think about the movement. And I think a lot of times when we use the T, we steer too much to explicit knowledge and internal focus for the athlete. So again, I think also if you use the T smart and give like more outcome goals and stuff like that, it's more valuable than to when you use the T and say, okay, now use your elbow like this or use your knee like this. Because also in that sense, it steers towards more internal focus. So for me, the T, it gives a lot of very risky factors that leads to more negative transfer than it really has pros.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The first video I showed, I think, is a good example of that. Like those cones are used to get you to a position, but then you still have to look up and find the ball, right? Dribbling around cones with a soccer ball, you're teaching people to look down at the ground, right? That's the last thing you want, right? Or focus on these internal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, thanks, guys. That was really good. Hopefully, we gave you some insights into pitching and hitting training. So, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.